Portuguese citizenship. Is it possible to apply now for Portuguese citizenship? Was there a law that was passed that cancels the previous law and basically abolishes the opportunity to apply for Portuguese citizenship? Today we will explain all the legal situation in this matter, and we will explain why it is possible, even now, 2023, to apply for Portuguese citizenship. Basically, the legal history, and this is what I'll try to focus on, is that in 2005, a law was passed in Portugal to grant to all descendants of Spanish expelled Jews Portuguese citizenship. Basically, the question was how to define who is a descendant of a Spanish Portuguese expelled Jew. And this question isn't so simple. Basically, you have millions and millions and millions of descendants. Many of them are Jews, but even many, many more are non-Jews today. The government of Portugal basically nominated two Jewish communities in Portugal, one in Lisbon and the other one in Porto, to decide who in effect is a descendant of Spanish expelled Jews. Both these Jewish communities have different opinions on the matter, and that just explains the complexity. Because there's so many eligible descendants around the world, and because so many people even applied since 2005, we have basically over 75,000 applications that were submitted in Israel alone, and over 150,000 applications all over the world that were submitted, and the number has almost no limit because we're dealing with millions and millions of people that are eligible. And because of political turmoil within Portugal and disagreements, basically in 2022 regulations were passed that limit the ability to obtain Portuguese citizenship as a descendant of expelled Spanish Jews. Another thing that happened was that Roman Abramovich, who was a very wealthy Jewish billionaire, also received a certificate that he's from Porto, that he's a descendant of expelled Jews, and he may be, and he may not be. We don't know, but also because of his position, it created a lot of press and a lot of news, and that just helped to create more political turmoil. And because of that as well, these regulations were eventually passed. Because these regulations were passed, it basically put a block on all the applications that were submitted. Most offices and companies that dealt with applications for Portuguese citizenship closed. Afterwards, what happened was that more people continued to apply, because even with the regulations you can apply, it just becomes more difficult. And after many applied, many lawyers in Portugal submitted petitions to the Supreme Court arguing a very rational argument that these regulations are in effect unconstitutional. Why? Because basically you have a hierarchy between a law and regulations. A law is higher in hierarchy than the regulations. And the argument was that if you want to pass regulations that contradict the law, it's not enough to do so in regulations. You must do so in a law that has the same hierarchic level than the original law. So basically what happened was that after these petitions were submitted, the respondent, the government of Portugal, submitted a draft law, basically taking the same regulations that have a lower level in hierarchy than the law and giving them authority of a law. This draft law was not yet approved, but basically what this means is that the respondent to these petitions, the Portuguese government, agrees with the logic of the petitions. If we didn't agree with the logic of the petitions, there's no point in submitting a draft law and turning these regulations and giving them the authority of a law. And if I was a judge in the Supreme Court in Portugal, I would ask the respondent and say, you basically agree with the petitions, right? Because you submitted the draft law, meaning that you agree that these regulations are problematic and unconstitutional. So basically we're in a situation now where you have a draft law that we're waiting to be approved as a law. This will probably happen. And we have many petitions that are waiting for a judgment on whether these regulations are constitutional or not constitutional. So what happens to applications that are currently submitted during this gray area period? Our position, and the position of many experts, is that most likely these applications will be dealt with based on the original law without the regulations that are unconstitutional, because most likely the draft law will be accepted, and this, as was explained before, means that also the petitions will need to be approved. If you have any more questions, you can feel free to ask us, but please note that this video explained the risks that you're taking, and it's very important that you understand them before you submit an application by yourself or with a lawyer. In any case, we're here to answer any questions or any further clarifications you may have. Thank you very much for your time.